Hey guys, welcome. This is Peter with 630 in the garage. So what we're doing with this series is to show you how to build the bike when you receive it from online and in the garage. You know, a lot of times in the old days and with race bikes and mountain bikes nowadays, you definitely want to get your bike in a bike shop, but for the entry-level bike, recreational bikes, you know, the world has changed and we buy things on the internet now. So a lot of times this is where you'll be. You'll order your bike and then you'll be in the garage, and so we don't have the bike stand, we don't have the professional equipment. It's okay, we can still put together that bike for you, and I'm going to show you how. All right, we don't need a lot of tools. We just need a box cutter or some snips, something to open the box, and then to cut the zip ties. We're going to need a 9mm and 10mm either socket wrench or a regular wrench. So 9 and 10mm wrench, 4, 5, and 6mm Allen wrenches, the Phillips screwdriver, and then we also want some bigger wrenches, 13, 14, and 15mm. Also, you can use the old crescent wrench or adjustable wrench there. Okay, I'm going to set these to the side. This is the 630 Body Ease. It's a 21 speed. Like I said, a more complicated bike like that is usually assembled in a bike shop. But nowadays, of course, we do like to buy things online, and so we can. I can show you that we can adjust all the things, the brakes and the gears for this bicycle, the front and rear derailleur, the brakes. Okay, so let's get the knife here and let's open up the box. We'll come here all taped up for shipping. Okay, when you open up the men's body, excuse me, when you open up the men's body ease, you're going to find on the top parts box. All right, let's go ahead and open that. Look at that first. And I'll lay these out in front so you can see them nicely. First of all, we just have some tools which may help: a 5 and 6mm wrench, a multi-tool, and then some reflectors. Also have one other item in here. This is a cover for the headset, which is below the handlebars. It's just a little cover that will go and cover some of the hardware and make the bike look a little nicer. Pedals, and the quick release skewer. That's it. That's all that's in the parts box. Okay. Let's see what to do with all those. Now go ahead and pull the bike out of the box. Here's our bike, standing there by itself. Nothing left in the box but some packaging, and there's an owner's manual as well. Okay, so first thing we're going to do, we're going to take the knife again, the box cutters or the snips, and we're just going to cut all of the zip ties. Just cut all the zip ties you can find. Usually I miss at least 2. There aren't that many actually. Okay, I think that's all the zip ties. We'll find out later if it's not. So here's what happens. Now the handlebars are loose. They're going to be down here like this. We can pull out the saddle and the seat post. We're going to take the packaging off of that so you can see what that looks like. There we go. Just like that. Set it out here for you to see so that you're clear on everything. I'm going to pull the wheel off of the crank arm and discard the cardboard. There's two pieces of plastic on either side of the axle. That's just packaging. You can pull those guys off as well. Now, go ahead and you can take this piece of packaging out of the top of the bike right here. This is called the headset. Take the packaging out of the headset. And just for now, we're going to set the handlebars in there just to kind of get them out of our way. All right? And with the handlebars, you gotta be careful how we put them in, okay? And I'll show you right now actually that we want the cables to have a nice flow, okay? This one on this side coming down this way, this one like this, and then this one crossing over. It's a nice natural flow. When they packed the bike, in order to save room in the box and all that, they've turned the fork backwards. The fork is backwards right now. Take off this packaging here. And then this is also packaging. Discard that. You're going to turn the fork around like this to the front. Okay? Make sure you turn the fork around to the front. The bike will stand like that, just fine on its own. And we'll take the front wheel. So we've got the front wheel. Now, this tire is directional. Doesn't matter that much on a bicycle. On a car, if you hit heavy rains or whatever, that will help shed water and keep you on the road. On a bicycle, it's less important. However, it will look nice if it's in the right direction. If you're confused about which direction to face it, just reference the rear wheel and match it. I'm going to slip the front wheel in, but first to do that, we have to open the brakes up. It's very simple. You can just kind of squeeze them together a little bit. There's this silver curved piece here called a noodle. You can just squeeze these together a little bit and then pull that noodle out of this tab here. And the brakes will open up nice and wide. And then we can just put the wheel in right there. And we're going to rest the forks on the axle. Now you'll see that the axle is very short. It does not protrude outside of the fork. There's just a little bit of it coming out of the hub. Go ahead and put the kickstand down and the bike will hold itself nicely. There you go. All right, so with that axle being short like that, it's because it's not bolted on like you may be used to with nuts going onto the axle to hold it onto the fork. What actually happens is we take this quick release skewer that we took out of the parts box. There are two springs on it and a nut here. Remove the nut and one of the springs. The axle in this front wheel is hollow. So you can just take the quick release skewer and put it right through that axle. Put the spring back on. The narrow end of the spring goes on first, then the nut. When you're tightening the skewer, you want it in an open position. Okay, and then let's move the bike over a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. So this is closed when you can read the name on it and open when you can't. So go ahead and tighten it down a little bit, tighten it in the open position. And then when it gets to where it's giving a little bit of resistance, go ahead and try giving it to close it. There's one way you can tell. The best way to tell if it's tight enough is that you tighten up a little bit and then you go ahead and clamp it closed with the palm of your hand. When you close it, it should leave a good impression on the palm of your hand. Okay, and that'll make it nice and snug. Now be mindful, when you put the wheel in, it needs to be centered. Sometimes when you tighten that down, it may be a little to the left, it may go a little to the right. Just make sure that you got that centered. It's best you know how. Sometimes you can hold it with your left hand and tighten with the right. Make sure it's nice and centered in the fork. That way you can get the brakes adjusted nicely. If it's too much to the left or right, you'll never get those brakes adjusted when the time comes for it. Okay. Now let's grab that little part we had, the headset cover. Again, this is just a cosmetic piece. It's not even necessary, but it does look nice. So we'll go ahead and grab your 6mm Allen wrench. We'll hold on to that. We're going to pull the handlebars back out. And I'm going to place that cover just right on top of the headset. Pop it on there. And then we'll throw the handlebars back in. This part that holds the handlebars is called the stem. The stem has a mark on it. Shows you the highest point that you can pull it out. Don't have it out any higher than that. It's dangerous. Get your 6mm Allen and tighten down on the stem bolt. As it starts to get a little firm, go ahead and stand over the front wheel and line that stem up right with the front wheel. That's how you get it lined right up. Just do your best job. Everyone sees a little bit differently. And if it doesn't look right to you when you're on the bike, get back off and you can adjust it back again. This particular bike has also 3 bolts on the top to adjust the handlebar angle. So it's also 6mm. We'll loosen those 3 a little bit. You don't need to do much, maybe a half turn, maybe 1 turn at the most. While it's loose like this, you can go ahead and take off the packaging. The packaging was on the handlebar before it got installed in the stem, so you're going to have to move it back and forth a little bit to get all the packaging off and out of there. Okay, once you do that, then go ahead and tilt the handlebars forward, about like that. You'll know when you ride the bike if it feels right for you. If you don't like it like that, you can tilt it forward a little more. You can always tilt it back a little more. About like that is about where most people will enjoy riding with it. Also, as you can notice, the shifter and brake lever units are also already adjusted for about that position. These can also be tilted. Now here's a note. On the clamp, there are 3 bolts right here on this clamp. Make sure you tighten those evenly. Don't just crank down on one and then do the next one, then do the next one. Do them all at the same time. A little bit, a little bit, a little bit, going around each time. That's just typical for any sort of multi-bolt tightening situation. That's a pretty funny phrase. All right. Now you may notice that I didn't take all the packaging off. I just removed the zip ties. I did that to protect the frame while I'm working. That's just a habit of mine. I usually do that when I assemble bicycles, is leave the packaging on. That way, if something happens while you're working, you drop a tool or you make a bad movement, you could scratch your frame before you've even ridden it. So keep the packaging on. I would say I'm going to take it off right now so that you can see more clearly and it doesn't look so, so it looks less confusing with all this extra stuff. But my recommendation is go ahead and leave the packaging on until you're done with the assembly. There are plastic pieces on both sides of the rear wheel. Throw those away. There we go. Let's do the pedals. Pedals next, and then we'll work up from there. With the pedals, you may know this, but some people don't. There's a right one and there's a left one, and it matters. They're not both the same. The right one is regular threaded, so when you thread it into the bike, it's going to be to the right or clockwise, which is the regular way, righty-tighty. With the left one, though, you're going to be turning to the left, counterclockwise. So it's the opposite. Instead of righty-tighty, the left one is lefty-tighty. And I'll show you how to put both of those on. Go ahead and insert it into the crank. Turn the right one clockwise to the right. And when you got as tight as you can with your hand, then you're going to grab your 15mm wrench and just go ahead and snug it down. So I've got the 15mm. Make it nice and snug. Now for the left one, let's turn this way so you can see. There we go. This one, remember, is the opposite. So instead of righty-tighty like normal, we're going to go left, lefty-tighty, counterclockwise towards the front of the bike with our turning. And then that'll tighten in. As tight as you can go with your hand. And then you can finish up with the 15 millimeter. Make that nice and snug. There we go. And onto the saddle. The saddle on this bike is already on the seat post. It makes it easy to do. So we'll just open the quick release seat post clamp. This one's also very easy to open up, just like the front wheel. You can slide that in. This one also has a minimum depth, just like the stem did. Put it in like this. Tighten down. So it's snug. And then clamp it. A little too tight. There we go. Loosen a little bit. Clamp it down like that. Now, a quick release saddle is a great thing. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about it really quickly. You can use it to adjust it up or down if you need to. A lot of times you'll find a saddle height that you like, and you won't need to move it up and down though. You know, if you have a friend who's riding at a different height than you can adjust it. Also, if you're in an area where the bike may be, you know, tampered with or stolen even, the beach or downtown areas, you can take the saddle out and take it with you, or put it in a more convenient place where it can also be locked with the rest of the bike. Because sometimes it happens that people have a saddle taken. Okay, so the bike is basically assembled at this point. We need to adjust the brakes and the gears still. This is a 21 speed, so we're going to be doing the rear brakes, the rear gears, and the front gears as well. Okay, but we'll start with the brakes. We'll do the brakes first. The brakes only require 2 tools. They're really quite simple, but you got to get them just right. And you can do it. I'll show you how. All we need is a 5 millimeter Allen wrench and a Phillips screwdriver. Okay? So we'll start on this side. Get my 5 and loosen the nut on the back of the brake pad. Turn the brake pad. And while it's loose, it can slide up and down. It can be moved up and down to the right and the left, all over the place. Go ahead and, while it's loose, push it up against the rim. Then you know it's going to be right where it needs to be to contact that rim perfectly. Make sure there's a little bit of rim at the top, so that you don't want that brake pad getting anywhere near the tire. So line it up just perfectly, push it up against the rim, tighten down. You may want to back off and just hold the pad where it is so it doesn't twist when you tighten the nut, and then tighten down on it. With most bolts and nuts on the bike, they're not like a car. You don't want to just crank down as hard as you can on it. Usually just one hand is enough strength, will be enough force to tighten it. You don't need extra torque. It can be easy to strip or snap a bolt on a bike if you go too far. So don't do it. Sometimes it'll make the bike impossible to ride even until you get the new part. So. Then we'll do the other brake pad. Let's see if I can do it this way and you can still see it here. Okay, there we go. It's a little bit loose, so I can move the pad up and down, move it all different sorts of ways. I'm going to push it right up against the rim so I know it's right where I like it. And when it's right where I like it, I'll go ahead and tighten it down. And then holding it nice and in place and make it nice and tight so it won't slip out of position later on. Okay? Now, loosen the cable with that same 5 millimeter. Now the cable's nice and loose. Now on the other end, it's not attached to the brake lever. This is the brake lever right here. We're going to put the cable into the brake lever like this. So pull it out, and here's the cable. And then this end here will slip into, if you pull the brake lever back, there'll be a little tab that comes out with a little circle and a little slot in it. You can just slip it right into there. Now this whole brake is slotted, if you look, including the barrel adjusters over here. This whole, and you can line those slots right up and slip the cable through. See that? You just slipped right in. You can move those off a little bit so that now it's in there. You can't come out. And then slide the cable housing, that's this black part, it's called the cable housing. Slide that into the brake lever. Perfect. Now, go down here and grab what's called this is called the noodle, this silver guy here. You can slip it into this tab here, and that will connect the brakes together. We still have the cable loose. We haven't tightened it with the pinch bolt yet. So now what I'm going to do is, I like to just grab the end of the cable like this, push the brakes in, and hold it with my hand. Nice, pretty tight, about as tight as I think maybe it should be, a little bit tighter than that actually. And then tighten down the cable, and then I'll give this a squeeze and see how I like it. It feels a little too tight for me. There's not a lot of movement. So I will loosen this, and I'll let out a little bit of cable. I just let out maybe about 2 millimeters of cable. Now that squeeze feels nice. That feels about right there. Give a few hard squeezes to take out any slack. Okay, looks good. Now, you want to test and see if the brakes are, if the wheel is going to move through the brakes. Now look, the wheel is actually dragging on the right brake here. It can't move at all. Okay, so we have to center the brakes. That's done with this Phillips right here. It's super easy to do. Both sides of the brake have an adjustment screw right here. If you turn this adjustment screw, it's just a Phillips, clockwise, if you tighten it, it will push against that spring and make this brake stronger. So it will pull more away from the wheel. I'm going to give it, since it looked like it needed a lot, I'm going to give it about maybe 3 turns there. I'm going to give the brake a few squeezes. Still didn't work. Still up against that one. That means this one's about as strong as it can be, but this one's still stronger. So I'm going to actually do the opposite on this one now. I'm going to back this screw out, and I'll make that brake a little bit weaker. This brake a little bit weaker. Give a few squeezes. Now they're much more centered. You can see it's not dragging at all. I'll just keep going and going. Perfect. That's great. Feels good up here. The wheel rolls smoothly. Let's go do the same thing in the back. Exact same process. 5 millimeter to the nut here behind the pad. Loosen that pad so it can move up and down all around. While it's loose, push up against the rim and get it in the position it needs to be in. While it's in the position that you like it, go ahead and tighten it. Be careful that the pad doesn't twist when you're tightening. So hold it tight. And then I'll do the other side. Okay. This cable you don't have to put in. It's already in the shift. It's already in the brake lever up here. Okay. You can see it's moving the brakes right here. What I do want to see though is if the brakes are centered, so I'm going to move the wheel. In this case, the brakes are centered. It looks really good. The wheel is moving freely. The brakes stop it perfectly. However, if it wasn't, again, I could use the adjustment screws here, turning it in the tightening direction clockwise to make this brake pull away from the rim. Making this brake pull away from the rim a little bit, or vice versa there. Or I could turn it counterclockwise to weaken it, in which case it would get a little closer to the rim. All right. Now that we've done the rear brake, we didn't want to do the rack yet because it would get in our way. Okay, now we got the brakes done. Since the brake is out of the way, we can go ahead and attach the rack. We left that till after the brakes just because it can get in our way a little bit, okay? So to do that, the bolts you need are already in the frame. all you need is a 4mm Allen. Go ahead and remove those 2 bolts, one on each side. Slide the rack in to line up those holes, and now very carefully line up those bolts. Sometimes that rack wants to move over a little bit and change the angle of the bolt and all that. That will cause the bolts to cross threads, and that's not good. It's quite common, actually. That's why I'm letting you know for this particular part of the operation. So that bolt should go in nice and smoothly. If it's not, back that thing out and start again. It means you let the rack angle that bolt. Now, when you tighten it, one hand, just nice and snug, just gentle, okay? You don't want to snap that bolt. It can happen if you give it too much pressure. Sometimes people don't know how strong they are. Okay, we'll do this one. All right, everybody, ta-da. The rear rack is on. That was super easy. Now, we got the brakes done. We've got everything on the bike. It looks like a bike. You can go ride it right now, but we do need to adjust the gears if you want to get them shifting just perfectly. At the factory, they'll put on the parts, but they don't adjust the gears. It takes a little bit of doing. Now, in the bike shop, we would put the bike up in a bike stand. We would hold it up like this because it is easiest to, the gears won't shift unless the pedals are being turned like this. So it's easy to work on the gears and turn the pedals at the same time. Now, to adjust a rear derailleur, I could usually do that in the shop in about 40 seconds. Get it all perfectly adjusted. Here it's going to be a little bit of back and forth, okay? It takes a little bit of time. It's not a difficult thing to do, though. And I'll show you how right now. So the first thing you want to do is we've got the shifter at the top here. The shifter on the right is the rear, for the rear. And you can see it's numbered. It shows the gears 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Go ahead and pull the trigger. There's a trigger which goes to the higher gears, and then there's a thumb that lets it go back to the lower gear. Go ahead and pull the trigger all the way until it gets to 7. So pull it, hit that trigger several times to get the shifter all the way to number 7. Now, take up the kickstand, pick up the back of the bike, pedal the bike, and that chain will come right down to 7th gear, okay? Now, all we need to adjust the rear derailleur is a 9mm socket or a 9mm wrench or an adjustable wrench. There's a 9mm nut right here that we're going to have to loosen, and then just a Phillips. So 9mm Phillips, 2 tools. First thing you do is you want to loosen the cable. You do not want to adjust the derailleur when it's under any sort of tension or pressure from the cable. So go ahead and loosen that. There we go. That's loose now. Don't loosen the nut so much that it comes off. It's hard to put back on. Now, the derailleur is free of the cable. It can move back and forth all it wants to. It's going to the chain is naturally going to go into the smallest gear, which is 7th. Okay? So now what we want to do, and this is where it's different from doing it in a bike stand, is that the derailleur is going to move towards the wheel and away from the wheel to move the chain into the gears. When the chain is actually in a gear, it should be lined up nice and vertically with the rest of the derailleur. So you can see the chain down here should be lined up perfectly with this, and you can also see that the chain next to the other gear is getting close to shifting into the next gear, which would be number 6, but not so much that it actually does. Now, the way to adjust that is there are 2 screws here. One is a high set screw, and one is a low set screw. Okay, we're going to do the high set one, okay, which is this one right here. It's just a Phillips. If I tighten this, it's going to push the derailleur towards the wheel, okay? So I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to start tightening that. I'm going to over tighten it, and you can see what happens. It's going to push it right into 6th gear, okay? So now if I go over here, kick up the kickstand, start to pedal, it's starting to want to shift in the 6th gear, and it actually did because I tightened too much on that high limit screw. So let's back that back out. And then make sure that chain is lined up nicely with the 7th. Let's see if that goes back into 7th. There it is. Now it's in 7th, and it's not making any noise, any racket there in the back. So it's perfectly adjusted for 7th. That's great. So at this point, since the shifter's in 7th, and we know that we just adjusted the gear for 7, they agree. At this point, we'll reattach the cable. Give it a few tugs so there's no slack in there. Put it back in the pinch bolt. Get your 9mm. Tighten it down. Make sure that one's pretty snug, because sometimes the cable can want to pull out if you didn't quite get it tight enough. Okay, now go back up to the shifter. We're in 7th right now. We're going to go 1 click to 6th gear from 7 to 6. Ready? 1 click. Okay? Take up the kickstand and we'll pedal and see if it actually goes into 6th. It did go into 6th. That's great. Sometimes it doesn't want to go into 6th. That's because there's a little bit of slack somewhere in the cable. You can adjust that very easily. Instead of going back to the pinch bolt, there's a barrel adjuster right here. Just turn that counterclockwise, maybe 2 or 3 turns. Try it again, see if that takes the slack out of the cable and moves it into 6th. Okay. So now, let's do 5. We're going from 6 to 5, 1 click, just 1 click. Should go into 5th gear now. Perfect. Now 1 click to 4. 4. Yes. 3. 2. And now 1. One is a little sluggish, so I'm going to do what I just said, tighten that cable a little bit. See if we can get it into 1. Doesn't want to go yet, let's see. Maybe a little bit tighter. There's one other thing, so for the low limit, that's the next one, and then we'll get the 1st gear correct, so we don't have it yet. There is a limit screw, which is the low one. So we have the high one and then the low one. The low one is right here. And if you look, it goes right through the derailleur. You can see the end of it, and it's pushing up against part of the derailleur there. All that's doing is stopping the derailleur from moving past 1st gear and into your spokes, which would be dangerous. So we want to make sure that there's a little bit of room between the end of the low limit screw and the derailleur, a little bit of daylight, so that the chain has enough room to get into 1st, but not so much that it goes into the spokes. The low limit screw is set properly, so it seems like we need a little more tension to get into 1st gear. Okay. First, I'm going to put in 2nd, and then we'll move it into 1st. And there it goes, right there, into 1st gear. And then, if you want, you can check it on the way back down. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I have to go put it back in 4 for us to do the front derailleur. So the rear derailleur is done. Good job. Front derailleurs. Front derailleurs are actually a little more tricky. A little more art to the front derailleur, but you can also do it. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and put your shifter here, pull the trigger until it gets into 1st gear. It's going to say 1 up here. Just pull that trigger 2 or 3 or 4 times. Just get it into 1st there. When you turn the pedals, your chain will go into the smallest chain ring. Okay, as well. Now, what we need is a 5mm Allen wrench. And I'm going to use the one that came with in the box. And we're going to loosen the cable pinch bolt. So the cable is loose. Again, we don't ever want to adjust the derailleur when it's attached to the cable. we'll just be fighting forces, and we could approximate it, but we'll never get it just right. Just take that cable out like that, nice and loose. Now what we're going to do is, if you look at the front derailleur, what it wants to do, there's a little sticker on it actually, which is a guide. And if you pull the derailleur out away from the bike with your hands, you can pull it away like this. It'll come and line up with the large chainring, with the teeth of the large chainring. And you'll see on the sticker on your own bike, there's a little drawing of 2 teeth from the large chainring. You just want to line those up, and you want to give about 1 millimeter between the bottom edge of the derailleur and the teeth. About 1 millimeter space, just enough that it clears it, but not too much space. Okay. Now this one looks pretty good, but if we need to adjust it, what we do is go ahead and loosen this clamp right here. I'm not going to do this one because it looks really good right now. So we would loosen this clamp bolt here enough so that it will hold its position, but that you can move it around. You can twist it a little bit, you can move it up and down. You want to get that 1 millimeter space between the teeth of the large chainring and the bottom of the derailleur plate. Now also, you want to make sure that when you look down on it, that the 2 plates of the derailleur, those 2 plates are parallel with the chain as well. So we look down inside it, and again, this one looks very good. So I'm going to leave it. I'm going to reattach the cable. This one is pulls down from the top, so it actually comes over a cam and then goes into a pinch bolt. So gives you a little more leverage, but just something to be aware of. It does, if yours is undone and you don't remember what it looked like, there's a channel coming over the top of the derailleur to guide the cable, and that gives you a little more leverage. Makes the shifting easier. So it actually comes over and grabs from the top like that. All right, now what we want to do, I skipped a step. So sorry. I've been doing this all day and I can't remember which steps I'm doing. While this cable is not attached, you do want to go, and there's a high and low limit screw on the front derailleur as well. You would want to turn, and you can watch on the top, you can turn the low limit screw probably clockwise is what you'll need to move that inner plate towards the chain. And you want it very close to the chain, enough that it'll start to almost to touch the chain, but not quite. And actually, now that I look at mine, it looks like I could use that. So let's do it. I'm going to detach the cable again. I'm going to get that low limit screw. I'm going to turn it clockwise so I can get the inside plate close to the chain, so it'll look like it's starting to push it onto the middle chain ring, but not quite. There we go, nice and close, but not touching, so that when we turn the pedals, we don't hear any noise. But the inner plate of that front derailleur is very close to the chain, so that when you push the shifter, it'll instantly push it over. Now let's reattach the cable. Go up to the shifter and push it into second. Okay. Lift the kickstand, turn the pedals, and it goes into second. Great. Let's put it into third. Turn the pedals, and it went into third, which is not third gear, but the third chainring, which is a large chainring. So, and then if you like, you can also set the high screw, which will keep it from getting too far out away from the chain. I'm going to turn mine clockwise a little bit just so it doesn't go quite as far out away from the bike as it is. Keep it nice and tight, and then it will run nice and smoothly. Okay, so now the bike is all together. We can brake it, we can shift. It's really rideable at this point, just about. We need to pump up the tires. Let me grab my pump. When you go to pump the tires, I always like to recommend look around the whole wheel and make sure the tire is seated nicely onto the wheel. Sometimes the bead of the tire can come off the rim a little bit, in which case the tube would slip out and it would pop when you put pressure in it. So just look all around, make sure that tire is nicely seated on that rim. Take the cap off the valve, get your pump, put it on the valve, pull the lever to lock it on the valve, and then start to pump it up. Also, you want to look and make sure that you do the right pressure. That will be on the side of the tire. And on this bike, it is, there it is. This one we can take 50 to 85 PSI. So there is a range there, and that's the safe range. But I would say just keep it at 85 because that makes a lot easier riding. If you put it in 50 PSI and then rode it around and then brought it back in, pumped up to 85 and then rode it around, you would notice the difference. It's very noticeable. It makes for much easier riding just having it pumped up at the highest pressure. So that's it. I hope that this is simple for you, and I hope that you're able to go ride your bike now. You want to go on a test ride and see if the brakes and the gears work. If they need a little bit of adjusting, also the saddle and the handlebars, the stem height, go ahead and make those adjustments. Have fun.